Hello and welcome to the talking point here on the Rangers Review with myself, Chris, Jack and Stevie Clifford, where we take an in-depth look at one of the key issues either on or off the field at Ibrox. Thank you to everyone who's joined us on the show over the course of the season so far. Safe to say, Stevie, we've provoked a bit of debate, but I think we've covered some good topics so far, and I'm sure this is one that's going to interest people quite a lot, as well as we have a bit more of a look at what the future holds for some of the younger players and look at the academy system at Auchenhowie.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's great that we can discuss things that does provoke such a positive reaction, such a vocal reaction. So, there's a lot going on at the football club, isn't there? It's full of opinions and we like that. We love the feedback. And it's everything so far has all been off the pitch. So it's nice, Chris, that we can have a look at things not only off the pitch, but on the pitch for our future as well today. So looking forward to it. Good to be here. Really enjoying the series that we're doing. So this will be another good one, I think.
I'll throw a couple of names at you to get off and running. If you look at the younger players who have been given their first team chance of late, I know we spoke earlier on in the season and looked at the academy, and he focused on Leon King and Alec Lowry, Adam Devine, and why it hadn't quite worked out for them. Safe to say, Rangers are now beyond those players. Obviously, some, including Alec, have left the club now on a permanent basis. That generation is almost a lost generation at Auchenhowie, unfortunately. The next generation, as is so often the case in youth development terms, people always speak of the next one's the best one. Just you wait until you see this group or this player coming through. It's always kicking the can down the line, but Rangers are going in a different direction. They are looking to try and bring more academy players through. And just in the last couple of weeks, we've seen Mason Munn get his debut against Fraserburgh in the Scottish Cup. And we've seen Bailey Rice, Paul Nsio and Finley Curtis play European football, play domestic football. Finley Curtis has signed a new contract until 2027 as well. What have you made of the last couple of weeks? Should it have happened earlier? Or could we have seen these boys introduced in the first team squad earlier? Or are you just pleased that all four of them are now getting a chance to actually show what they can do?
Well, again, that's a question that's got a lot of context to it, because if you think about when we left the Lowland League, we really have stagnated in terms of that development level in between the kind of 18s, 17, 18s to the first team, because there's been no games to play out with the Glasgow Cup, the SPFL Trust. There's been no league. We have played glorified head-to-head friendlies, which have been great, but at the same time, it's not competitive for these boys. So I'm glad we've made some difficult decisions there. There's no point in having Alex Lowry, Leon King, Alex Devine, boys like that not getting game time. Cole McKinnon falls into that category. They're your kind of four or so from that group that we thought had a chance, and they've stagnated, all of them, because we've not been able to give them first team football or give them a platform somewhere else that they can play. In terms of that, then it was always going to be difficult with Alex Lowry. We had to make a decision there. It's going to probably be difficult with Leon King. I think the manager's made it perfectly clear in his selection that Leon's got a lot to do before he gets in. And then you look at Cole McKinnon, out of contract this summer, he won't come back. Adam Devine's the same. So yeah, there's a lot of that generation that you talk about. I think perhaps, they've missed an opportunity. And then when you look at what we've got coming through now, and the names you mentioned, I'll start with Mason Munn. He's a good one to start with, Chris. Obviously, goalkeeper, first on the team sheet anyway. But Mason was offered a 4-year deal last summer, which he signed. There was interest from Arsenal and teams down south. He's a good commanding goalkeeper, Chris. He is a good shot stopper. And I seen him play Clyde. And Ian McCall was manager this year of Clyde. And he spoke very highly of him. A very good shot stopper. I think he was man of the match that night. Alex Lowry scored a couple of superb goals, but he was the one that kept Rangers in it. Good from strong with the cross, but he's not without a mistake. He's learning. Seen him get chipped by a boy at Stenhousemuir from far out. It was similar to Liam Kelly against Aberdeen, actually, that kind of trajectory. And we also seen him make a mistake with the ball at his feet against Fraserburgh. So he's going to learn from those moments. But, excuse me, I've still got this cough, Chris. I'm still struggling from it from way before Christmas and New Year. So I apologise. I think with regards to Mason, Mason's a good one because we need a homegrown keeper. We can take our time with him. He's 18 years old. We can give him those games like Fraserburgh, and we can give him the first team experience. He's training with Jack. He's training with Liam, who are two really experienced goalkeepers, and lots of advice to give him. So I think first one that we can box off as being a legitimately a promising youth player and someone that you would expect in years to come will get a loan, will break that first team barrier. Probably in the same trajectory as Alan McGregor, Robbie McCrory, where they took time away, come back in. I would think Mason Munn's a pretty solid investment in that, Chris. So first one ticked off, I think, for the show. Mason Munn's going to be okay, I think.
In terms of the others, Bailey Rice, a lot of talk about him coming through the ranks at Motherwell. Rangers obviously went and brought him in from Motherwell. The comparison has been made quite a number of times with Lennon Miller over recent seasons. Story going that at a certain age, at a certain time in their respective careers, they were both neck and neck. People believe that Bailey Rice was actually the better player, potentially had the higher ceiling. You look at recent seasons, obviously, Lennon Miller has played a lot of football, has gone on to really establish himself at Motherwell. I'm surprised he didn't actually move on from Motherwell during the January window, but will move on in the summer. He'll make them a tidy profit. Bailey Rice, he was given a fairly big billing by Michael Beale at the start of last season. Then also had to be very, very patient. Didn't manage to make that sustained breakthrough last season. Has come in, played against Man United, has really looked the part. I think out of the other three, if we can group them together, Rice, Nsio and Curtis, Rice is the one that I think people are perhaps most excited about. Rice is the one that people know a bit more about. And even just looking at last weekend against Ross County, he was the one that was also given more game time. Game time for all of these boys is the important factor here. It's going to be difficult for Mason Munn to play too regularly. You're not going to see the manager stick a goalkeeper on for the last 10, 15 minutes or give him a half. For Rice, for Nsio, for Curtis, the squad is in a position, and unfortunately the Premiership situation is in a position. The opportunities are going to be there for these guys, and these next few weeks and next few months, I think we'll really learn quite a lot about all three of them in terms of where they are and where they could potentially get to at Ibrox.
Yeah, look, I think Bailey Rice is the obvious one because he's had the hype, hasn't he? He's been spoke about quite a bit. Context surrounding Bailey Rice is when Michael Beale talked about him, he subsequently got injured. I think he missed a large chunk of last season. I believe he had a broken foot at some point in that spell. That might not 100% sure on the actual injury, but that was talked about at the time. I remember that training ground being talked about, and that's held him back. Then at the start of the season, he's in amongst it, and he's finally now been moved round to the first team dressing room and things. Now, I thought Philippe Clement's comment was really interesting on Sunday. I spoke to him about Bailey Rice, and he said Bailey had a lot to learn off the ball and really important about his positional work rate. And he said as well, make sure he's not just kind of floating about in games. And that's really interesting because I picked up on that. And I'm not in any way a footballer. I'm not in any way a scout. I'm not in any way a manager, except from Football Manager, where I am legendary. However, with Bailey Rice, I felt like that. Excellent on the ball. Fantastic on the ball. Really good left foot. Really eye to break the lines. Really good at inserted passes. Just like the one at Old Trafford, we've seen a wee bit of inventive to play in Cyril Dessers, who was offside but hit the post in that moment. He's got vision. And he's got talent off the ball. Can he work harder? Can he positionally be better? If he's a 6, he needs to be more disciplined in what he's doing. So that was all in my head. And it's interesting that the manager said that. So that'll be an interesting progression for him. Can he learn the offside of the ball kind of game side of it? Paul Nsio, again, he's like a Joe Aribo street style of footballer. Now, he came from, I remember talking to David McCallum about this. I'm sure he said he came from down near Tamworth, that kind of area, and they picked him up from one of the academies down there. He's a very similar player in style to Joe Aribo, box to box, a lot of it, close control and things like that. Now, Paul Nsio has outshone everybody in that B team in games, and I seen him at Stenhousemuir, and he was by far man of the match for me. Finley Curtis scored 2 on the night. Yanis Hadji and Danilo scored, and it was Paul Nsio by a mile who stood out. And he's got real capability. Now, people need to give him time, because that type of footballer, where he's, he plays on the edges of games and stuff like that, he's not quite a 10. I'm not sure if he's an 8, but he's not a 6. So it's just, he's got a wee bit of work to do before he properly starts, I think, integrating himself into the first team. And the only way that will come is through training and little snippets of games. And then we come to Finley Curtis, Chris, Finley Curtis, I've spoke about him on a briefing a wee bit this week, and I'll say the exact same as I said then. People ask what type of player he was. Is he like Chris Burke? He's not like Chris Burke. Chris Burke was a very technical winger who was tricky, could do step overs, could be that type of player. Finley Curtis is more like a Lovenkrands type, where he's an inside forward and very direct, can play 11, 7, 9 positions. As a 9 against Stenhousemuir, his raw pace, backed up against the defender, through ball, let it go through his legs, evaded the defender. By the time the defender turned, he's one-on-one and going through. So he's a more direct, almost like an old inside forward, in my opinion. That's exactly what he's like. He's got an eye for goal. That game that he came on, he ended up 3 or 4 shots at goal. And I think that's what he's like. He's going to take opportunities. He's going to play, instead of being wide, he's going to cut inside quite a bit. So I would say, and bear in mind, I am not an expert, Chris. That would be my kind of views on what type of players they are and what we can maybe expect. I think all of them have got an opportunity. It's about whether they take it now, because we've seen it before. Boys at that level, you think they're world beaters, but sometimes it can take a while. And then in the case of Clinton and Ciala, if you had asked me, I would have said, and if you'd asked the coaches and everybody else, because again, the manager alluded to it, maybe he wasn't quite ready for his progression, but has grabbed the opportunity and looks, he's a really promising youngster. So you can never quite tell, but it's going to be interesting. I would rather, this is where it becomes a bit controversial, I would rather see Bailey Rice than go and spend £2 million on a midfielder who would stifle his progression. We need to start seeing what these boys can do.
That's where another great youth development phrase or youth development cliche is pathway, and I think that's where Rangers have to show that pathway, that route to first team football is actually there. And a name that's no longer at the football club, but I think is definitely still worth discussing, is Zack Lovelace. He obviously moved on the transfer deadline day. We reported on the site that he's obviously back down to Millwall, Rangers getting a fee and some add-ons for him as part of that deal. And I think the Zack Lovelace story, it seems to all centre round about that game at St Mirren. I think back to Steve Davis in interim charge. Lovelace was the one that caught the eye in those opening stages, picked up the injury, and had a really difficult time since then. Ross McCausland, on the other hand, got his chance early on under Steve Davis, was then able to maintain his place within the squad under Philippe Clement, has then been given international recognition with Northern Ireland, has been given a new contract, has played a lot of domestic games, played a lot of European games. And you talk about sliding doors moments for young players. You can have all the talent in the world. You can have the right mentality. You can live your life the right way. You can have all the ingredients. Sometimes you need to be a bit of luck, and Zack Lovelace on that day didn't have the luck, and his Rangers career just never really recovered from that. I've always thought he looked promising from a number of times for the youth sides. I spoke to a couple of people, his former coaches down south. I think it was at Glebe Town that he came from originally, then went into the Millwall Academy. I actually spoke to Moses Ashikodi about him, because Ashikodi is the youngest player ever to play for Millwall. Zack Lovelace is the second youngest player ever to play for Millwall. And Ashikodi was really good on giving him some advice of, here's how you come and what to expect in Glasgow. It's not quite worked out. Will Rangers live to regret that one, if that's too strong a phrase? Is Zack Lovelace one that has got away, or was it perhaps just not meant to be?
I don't know if Rangers will regret it, because we never had it to lose it. And I think that's truthfully where we are. Zack Lovelace, before that infamous St Mirren game, actually picked up a hamstring kind of pull, strain, whatever, against Stenhousemuir for the B team, probably about 4 or 5 weeks before that, and then made his breakthrough and ultimately did it again, and subsequently did it again and again, to the point where he's been, every time he's had an opportunity this year, he's not been fit. Now, I pressed the manager on this, when are we going to see him? And again, in fairness to the manager, it's when is he going to be available for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games? He's not. And what's happened is, whenever he's got little snippets, he's not been able to follow that up with a run of games, because he picks up knocks. Now, the frustration becomes because we think he was good. He had all the capability, I think, of becoming a really solid, at worst, squad player for Rangers. He had the pace, direction, the ability to finish, a little bit of inventiveness. He had really good promise, but we never got to see it on the first team level. We never even got to see a collection of snippets because of his injuries. So will we regret it? I'm not sure. If he goes on to be a really good player, which we hope he does, a lovely young lad, and I hope he does go and make an impact, because then it will benefit us, because surely in that deal, Chris, we have not been naive enough to put sell-on clauses and things like that. We know it was a structured deal, people talking about it being up to 7 figures. Rangers tell you it's undisclosed. So I think the only kind of thing is, Chris, we had this story, didn't we, on Friday night? You know fine well, we had the Millwall story, went to the club, it gets kind of knocked down, then the manager tells us on Sunday he would have been involved, would have been in the squad, he gets an injection, and then Monday he signs for Millwall and he's straight into training. I understand why the manager would perhaps dodge the issue or whatever, but it gives people ammunition that don't perhaps agree with him to turn around and say you're lying to us. Well, I don't think it's quite that straightforward. I don't think it's quite that easy, but it gives people ammunition. It would have been easier, Chris, if he had just said, yep, there's talks there, potential might happen, we'll see over the next couple of days. But that was the thing that kind of was a wee bit troubling over the last couple of days. We seen it being reported down south, people close to Millwall, close to him, and it was always going to happen, I think. And once you realise that, I thought it was quite disappointing. Rangers did have a contract on the table for him, so he's chosen to go elsewhere. We wish him all the best, and that's really it, Chris. But it brings me on to something I wanted to ask you. You've asked me a lot, and I've prattled on, so I apologise. Kevin Thomson returning for the academy. Tom was a guy that I really like. Obviously worked with him and done 5-star stuff and nights out. He's a very humble guy, very driven. He's been so active in his love for the club in terms of getting back there. He's finally back there. I think this is a good appointment.
It's an appointment that I think should have been made some time ago. You look at how the academy is structured and the people in and around it. For me, Kevin Thomson adds into that and adds quite a lot. I know he made the decision to obviously leave the academy after a couple of seasons there and go and be a manager, be a coach in his own right. Did very, very well at Kelty. Had a really successful season there. Really surprised that no one actually picked him up after he made the decision to leave there. I thought he was a shoe-in for jobs. I know he's been in the running for other jobs. He's been put forward for other positions. It's not quite happened for him. But he's a guy who I think brings a lot to the Rangers Academy. He's still actually running his own academy at the same time. So he's now basically invested in youth football 7 days a week between his work at Auchenhowie and then his work at his own academy. he's putting a lot in here. This is not someone who's coming back into Rangers just to say, I've got a Rangers tracksuit and it's got a KT on it again. This is a guy who's putting a lot in it. He's sacrificing a lot to make it work, because he wants to be back in that building. He wants to be back in at a club that he also had great success at as a player, a club that he's got a real affection for, and I think he can bring a lot into that environment. You talk about standards and knowing the right ways to work, how to live your life the right way, how to do the right things. I think Kevin Thomson brings all of that in, plus a really good coaching CV, plus success as a manager. So he's going to go in and he's going to work at that under-18 level alongside Stevie Smith. Also, we'll come on and we'll talk about the change in the B team structure. So that B team is not going to be there in the same format that it has been over recent seasons. So 18s is really the top level now, if you like. So Kevin's going to go back in there. He's going to add his experience. He won't go in and be Billy Big Boss about it. He's not going to get in and suddenly say, well, I've worked under Steven Gerrard and I've done this and I've done that and I've won trophies under Walter. As you mentioned, a really humble guy, a really down-to-earth guy, but a guy who knows the game, and someone who I think will be a big asset within this new look structure. It's really interesting to see how the structure actually works, because, as you mentioned earlier on, they've moved away from best v best. They've tried the Lowland League and it's not worked. They tried to get a Conference League up and running to have B teams within the SPFL structure, and the SPFL clubs didn't go for it despite Rangers' best effort. So they've decided to go in a different direction. Those friendlies that you touched on earlier on, they served a purpose to an extent, but fairly meaningless, given that there was no 3 points, there's no win bonuses at stake. So they're going to go down a different route. Are you a fan of what's been proposed? I know Josh has written a lot about this in terms of the best way forward. 18s, keep them within the structure. When you get slightly older than that, they'll put you out on loan. They'll try and find the best club for you. Is that the best way to get these players the game time that they require?
Well, it's interesting, because when you're going to ask me about who you like in that youth team and the B team and stuff like that, the truth is that there's lots of players in there, Chris, that I think have got potential. When you think about young Christian Webster at centre half, he is son of Andy Webster, really good player. He's got potential. Then you look at Xander Hutton at right back, again, flying up and down that wing, really impressed me in games. He's got potential. And then further forward, you talked about Rice and Nsio. They're your kind of midfielders. And then further forward, Archie Stevens, who is a cracking little winger, plays at England under 17, under 18 level. He's went on loan to Dunfermline as well. And you look at the other side, obviously Lovelace is now gone. Finley Curtis has scored so many goals. So all throughout that team, there's potential everywhere throughout that team. It's what they do next with it. And I'm quite happy with that, Chris, like genuinely, about where we are and getting them out for that first team experience. I think it'll be really, really helpful. So yeah, I'm right behind that. I wanted to highlight something. You said a comment earlier on about, who's the next Great White Hope and stuff like that. Interesting that Scotland under 16 squad was named this week. There's no Rangers players in that. And the under 17s, there's only two. One of them, Aidan McCallion, and the other one, somebody that spoke about a hell of a lot within the youth development at Rangers, scouted by a lot of teams, wanted by a lot of teams, and Rangers have managed to tie him down, Alexander Smith. He is one to look forward to. He is one that will elevate now and gain from others moving on and moving out, because the B team will still be there. It was reported that it was scrapped. That's not quite right. The philosophy around it was scrapped. So you're no longer going to have a B team that's got Alex Lowry, Leon King, and things like that in it. Because as you said, when you get to a certain age, they'll be gone, Chris. So he's going to benefit from that, because he might be a year behind that level of play, but putting him forward might accelerate it also. I think when Tomo gets in there and gets a wee bit with him as well in that kind of position, they're the kind of ones that we need to be ready by the time they get to 18 so that we can go, right, he's got lots of B-team experience. Go and spend a year at Dunfermline like Archie Stevens, who are a great wee club. Not a wee club, that's wrong, sorry, I apologise. A great club in terms of that championship, etc. Somebody that could come up and be challenging. They've got a good wee stadium down there. You know, that's a perfect move for Archie Stevens. We need to make sure that Alexander Smith in a couple of years is getting that. So no, I'm quite pleased with that, Chris. Not got an issue in the slightest. So yeah, I mean, I would probably say back to you. I mean, how do Rangers then keep Alexander Smith? How do they stop Alexander Smith being Rory Wilson and Boody going down to Dyer, Boody going down to Man City, the wee man Billy going to Chelsea? How do you stop that? Because look at Mason Munn, Arsenal, everything all over him. Teams are all over Alexander Smith. And we've managed to tie these boys down. Granted, I get that. But how do you stop the next bit? Because we are, and this is the biggest issue Rangers face, slightly digressing, but I think it covers the point. When somebody like Leon King, Ross McCausland break into the first team, Cole McKinnon, their agents immediately come and say, we want 6 to 8 grand a week. Alex Lowry, 6 to 8, 10 grand, whatever it is, a week. We're now in a position where we're completely wage restructuring and we won't give that money anymore. So this causes big issues in terms of agent demands and things like that, because part of the reason Zack Lovelace isn't at Rangers is because we couldn't agree a contract with him for so long, because we won't give him that level of money anymore. Finley Curtis managed to get a deal and things like that because it's all incentive-based, the way I believe it should be, which is a great thing. But how do you stop that, Chris? One, how do you keep them? And two, how do you stop their demands suddenly becoming so astronomical for that level of player that we give them a big deal and then they don't progress how we are? And that's something we've suffered from.
I think it's going to be a really difficult situation for Rangers, and you've outlined it really well there, because I think even if you look at not just in a Rangers perspective, we've seen and we are seeing a number of Scottish players moving down to England before they've got anywhere near kicking a ball for a first team. But obviously the Brexit rules have had an impact on that. English academies are now looking at Scottish players more and more. If they can get them into the system before they hit a certain age, you can then train them up and they can then be classed as homegrown, which from a Rangers perspective we know is important in terms of European squads. So we are seeing, it's not quite a flood, but we are seeing more and more younger players. Munn have lost a couple. I think Dundee United lost a couple towards the end of the window as well. English scouts, English academies are coming up here and cherry picking the best ones, because they can offer. Now, if you're a guy at 14, 15, 16 and an English club comes in, they can offer you the world, and they can offer you financial security. Look at the training facilities, look at the games programme. And I had a piece on the site around about October time, I think, looking at that very problem from a Rangers perspective. Now, you mentioned a couple of names there, Rory Wilson being the most recent one, Maboody. You also know Billy's case better than anyone. And these players, when they're that good, when they've got that much potential, of course they're going to come to the attention of other clubs. And it goes back to what we've discussed over the last 20 minutes or so in terms of pathway. Can Rangers really say, we give you the best opportunity? If you stay here, you've got a training facility, you've got a coaching set up, and you've got a first team manager that's going to give you the chances. Give us a couple of years, give us this next stage of your career, and it'll be the best thing that you ever do. Can Rangers convince enough players that is the case? Ultimately, if they do give Bailey Rice, give Finley Curtis, give Mason Munn, if they give them the chance and give them that pathway phrase again, give them the game time, that then makes it easier for the likes of Smith to say, well, it happened to Bailey Rice. If I'm good enough, I will get my chance. Too often in recent years, Rangers have said they're a club that wants to produce young players. Actions speak louder than words. And the number of players that have come through that have really been given a chance and that have really made a success of it is just not high enough. It's one thing saying it, it's another thing doing it. If they don't do it with this group, if your Rices and your Nsios and Munns, etc., if they don't prove good enough, then it becomes harder and harder for the next generation and the next ones to then say, well, I'm not going to go and sign for Arsenal. I'm not going to go and sign for Chelsea. I won't even go and sign for Crystal Palace or Newcastle. And that's a really difficult thing that the Rangers, for all the talk about that 18 to 21, they have to crack that. They have to crack it further down as well and allow players and their families and their representatives to say Rangers is the best place. There's no reason why Rangers can't be the best place, but I say actions speak louder than words in that situation.
I'm just laughing, folks, because you can't ever accuse the Rangers review of not being live and authentic as Chris is getting his windows washed in the background there. And that's happened to Derek and everything. Move on. Look, get sent under the stairs, Chris. That's what you should do. No windows in here. It's fine.
I was hoping the
I wanted them to peek up, like if you wiped it. I really did.
I was hoping it wasn't going to show on that particular window, but at least it is clean and a good tool. Because after the storm the other week, there the office has been needing to be spruce up on the outside. I'm off next week actually, so it saves me doing it next week. So my shout out to Jonathan, the window cleaner. I don't know if he's a Rangers review watcher or not, but I know I've given him a shout out. Hopefully, it gets me a free window clean. But on that rather bizarre note, I think that's a perfect place for us to end. Everyone, thank you once again as always for joining me and Stevie on the talking point. If you like what we do here on the show, if you like what we do on the other shows, obviously Stevie is a regular on our morning briefing. If tactics is your thing, also Josh has his shows as well. And also if you like what we do on the website, as we always say, like and follow the channel, subscribe to the website, and help us continue to do what we do here on the Rangers Review. So Stevie, thanks for your time as always, much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, mate, and thank you for everyone that pitches in the comments and gives us feedback, much appreciated. And again, we'll hopefully in a couple of weeks, Chris, we can talk about the first team and away form and wins at Tynecastle and what's happening next in Europe. That would be a nice one to do next, I think, as we've been now 3-4 months and not once touched on what's happening results wise. So that was a good one today. As I say, I'm no expert. I can only tell people what I've seen, and there's much more qualified people than me within the support. So it'd be great to hear people's feedback as well. What do they think of Bailey Rice? What do they think of Paul Nsio? What do they think of Xander Hutt and Mason Munn? That's what I'm looking forward to reading. Am I giving them too much encouragement? Do people have other players that they're looking forward to seeing? Let us know in the comments, and we can certainly revisit this one, I think, Chris, in 6 months or so, because it'll be a good one to keep an eye on.
I do. Everyone, thank you as always, and we'll see you soon.